thank you very much for giving us your time. And
Sure.
it was a pleasure listening
Delighted.
to your lecture some time back. Just to get to know a little more about some of the other things that you have been doing. I believe that there has been this online course in which you have been involved with the SDG Academy and that course on child development. And can you just tell us how is the response and what kind of expectations you have that it will help in the global scenario of early childhood?
Sure. So the course is called The Best Start in Life, Early Childhood Development for Sustainable Development, and it's part of this suite of courses that an organization called the SDG Academy, or the Sustainable Development Goal Academy, has put together. And that's part of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is research and technical network advising the Secretary General on the development and now the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So my course on early childhood development, the intent was to provide both the richness of the science of how children develop in the early years, the neuroscience of early childhood development, the notions of culture and human development that underpin the early years. But then about 2/3 of the course is on programs and policies. So it's a very interesting sector because it has the challenge of trying to integrate health and nutrition and education and social protection and child protection, right? And so we take the student through each of those sectors, we talk about multi-sectoral strategies, and then we have a set of topics like community-based programs, child protection and children with disabilities, addressing issues of conflict and disaster and refugee children, how to build inclusive approaches to policy, and then innovations for the future. These are examples drawn from all over the world, and we've been very happy with the response. So
how many countries are getting represented in the student group?
Virtually all the countries of the world are represented,
that's
and the last
very
version had 7,400 students. So we've been very happy, and the participation has been tremendous.
When you look at all the countries in terms of the programs and the things that are happening there, what do you think are the common challenges that early childhood is across these countries? And also, what is common in terms of that everywhere there is a common practice or a common way of looking at early childhood programs? Is there a trend in that kind of a thing that you can easily make out that this happens in all the programs across the countries? And any specific challenges that you feel you can identify in these Latin American countries?
Well, I'll speak on the worldwide basis because we know that about 250 million children under 5 are not reaching their developmental potential. And that comes from the most recent Lancet series in early childhood development. So unfortunately, what most of the countries in the world have in common is that they are not investing enough in quality early childhood development programs and policies. And by quality, I mean most centrally the quality of interactions that children have with their teachers, these moment-to-moment interactions, and the ability of programs to support those serve-and-return responsive interactions between adults, caregivers, parents, and children. So that's the critical challenge facing programs. We tend to concentrate on access. We tend to concentrate on structural issues like providing safety, health, very, very important issues. Certainly snacks and nutritious meals, those are all important. But we often leave out the most powerful influences on learning. And so that's, I think, if there's anything that many countries have in common, it's that their systems around early childhood programs and policies need to be reoriented towards those factors that really build learning and brain architecture. So that's, I think, the common challenge. if there are kind of movements going on in global ECD that are very positive, I think there's an increased focus on the first 1,000 days and the need to support in an integrated way health, nutrition, responsiveness, stimulation, and learning.
Yes,
so
yes.
that, I think, is a very positive trend.
Right. So I also came across in your biodata that the recent book, Cradle to Kindergarten, and one of the things that I read that it is a book that is really presenting a very comprehensive policy for the US in terms of particularly early years and daycare. Can you tell us a little on what is your, what was it that you have recommended in the...
Sure, yeah. So this is a comprehensive approach to early childhood care and education that also takes into account things like parental employment. So it has 4 elements to the policy. The first is paid parental leave for the period right after birth to support, and this is directed towards the United States, so high rates of parental employment, often starting very early as a few weeks after birth. And that's because childcare is so expensive, and then there is no support of wage replacement for taking that time off of work. The United States, for an OECD country, has one of the worst parental leave policies. And it is unpaid and is not available to the most marginalized workers. So that's a core of it. The next piece is providing entitlement to quality childcare for those who are of low incomes and are working and need that support. And this is also viewing childcare as a learning opportunity. The third is to build universal preschool education, starting at the age of 3. And I'm delighted to hear that this is something that is being considered within the new version of the Right to Education policy here in India, because that's super important. So this is the notion of high quality preschool education. It could be based in centers attached to schools. It could be in more community-based settings. It does have to be a mixed setting system to get to that level of scale. And then the last is to think about the most vulnerable families at the highest levels of stress, to provide comprehensive family supports. So certainly supports for parenting, like very good home visiting programs, but also efforts to support with social protection policies and comprehensive services for things like parent mental health, domestic violence, substance use, these issues that we know create conditions of extreme adversity for children.
Must read it now.
Yes, so it has both universal and targeted components. We think this is what all children need, and yet the United States is one of the countries that invests the very least in early childhood development as a proportion of GDP among the OECD countries, and we think that has to change.
Yes. Most of the quality research often point out that the most significant factor in impacting quality is the teacher. And so what do you think are the 1 or 2 biggest issues in kind of addressing the issue of workforce? Like how do we enhance the workforce in various ways, training apart, but the larger macro issue of having good workers in any program, what kind of inputs would be most useful?
The most important is to build on principles of adult learning and relationships, to understand the conditions under which teachers can learn, be motivated to improve their strategies, and to build from peers, from mentors and coaches, the constant improvement of their work. That, I think, is hugely motivating. So I'm sure you and I get a lot of pleasure out of constantly learning on the job, and we learn in part from students, and in part from peers, and in part from mentors and older colleagues. And so Anganwadi workers or other early childhood providers are really same in the sense that as adults, we all need rich learning opportunities. It has to happen within trusting relationships with rapport, and it has to be with the proper support so that you're not poor when you're caring for young children. I think that is also a very important workforce support. If you're struggling to make ends meet, those stresses get in the way of quality teaching.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the inputs that you've given us.